showcasing the record number of migrant crossings that are overwhelming resources along the border.
Governors across the United States are speaking up in support of Texas Governor Greg Abbott's action being taken along the border.
Nice weather, beautiful day, but a very dangerous border. We're going to take care of it. Thank you.
The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in favor of the Biden administration. Governor Abbott released a statement declaring an invasion.
Their support for Texas, as is House Speaker Mike Johnson. The fight over access is expected to play out in the courts.
Time for the speakers and some of my Republican friends in Congress who are blocking this bill to show a little spine.
Texas and federal government clash. President Biden and former President Trump recently visited the southern border of Texas, where immigration has become a contentious issue in the presidential campaign. 3 years ago, Governor Texas Greg Abbott launched Operation Lone Star, deploying thousands of police and soldiers and miles of barriers to deter record numbers of illegal crossings. The Supreme Court has repeatedly ruled that immigration is the job of the federal government, but rarely has a state so aggressively challenged that authority. In January, Governor Abbott ordered his state National Guard to block the federal government's border patrol from Shelby Park, a dusty stretch of border along the Rio Grande in Eagle Pass, Texas. In December, thousands of people a day crossed this section of the Texas border, a record from this section of the Texas border. The U.S. Border Patrol had to transform Shelby Park into an open-air holding center. Weeks later, Governor Abbott ordered his Texas National Guard to block the federal government's border patrol from entering the park without permission. He argued that the federal government had failed to fulfill its obligation to the states, and that some heard echoes of Texas' history of rebellion and threats of secession. Texas Department of Public Safety Lieutenant Governor Olivares showed us where National State Guardsmen were installing fresh razor wire barriers along the river. The issue is trying to prevent another influx, as when Border Patrol is here setting up a processing center. It will attract and encourage more migrants to cross the river because they know where to go. Sierra Park has been one of many spots along the Texas border where coils of sharp wire have been going up since Governor Abbott launched Operation Lone Star in 2021. Since then, thousands of migrants have been arrested and detained on trespassing charges. State troopers have cracked down on human smuggling rings, and the state has spent more than $150 million sending migrants on buses to cities like New York and Chicago, turning the trouble at the border into a political and financial headache for Democratic mayors. Today, there are an average of just 3 people crossing the border illegally. Raul Ortiz, former chief of the U.S. Border Patrol under President Biden and deputy chief under Trump, has expressed frustration with the current border security measures. He criticized Governor Greg Abbott for not cooperating with the Border Patrol and playing politics with immigration, while also expressing frustration with President Biden,
showcasing the record number of migrant crossings that are overwhelming resources along the border.
Governors across the United States are speaking up in support of Texas Governor Greg Abbott's action being taken along the border.
Nice weather, beautiful day, but a very dangerous border. We're going to take care of it. Thank you.
The Supreme Court ruled 5-4 in favor of the Biden administration. Governor Abbott released a statement declaring an invasion.
Their support for Texas, as is House Speaker Mike Johnson. The fight over access is expected to play out in the courts.
Ortiz believes that agencies should prioritize strategic and meaningful decisions over political considerations. As the chief of the Border Patrol, Ortiz commanded 21,000 people and has never had one conversation with the president or vice president. He emphasizes the need to ensure that Central America, South America, and Mexico understand that if a smuggler charges migrants without a legitimate claim to asylum benefits, they will be sent back. Ortiz believes that the White House has sent mixed messages to migrants, as evidenced by the littered ground littered with wet clothes left behind after crossing to the Rio Grande. Migrants are still crossing the border, and the soldiers on the U.S. side of the border are not much of a deterrent, as they fear the cartels in Mexico more. The Border Patrol estimates another 1.6 million people have entered the country illegally without getting caught. The Biden administration has carried out 4 million expulsions and deportations over the past 3 years, more than the Trump administration. However, it has also allowed a record 3 million people to remain in the country for years while their immigration cases are heard. The Border Patrol estimates another 1.6 million people have entered the country illegally without getting caught. President Biden visited Shelby Park with Governor Abbott and President Biden at the Texas border in Brownsville. He believes that if Republicans were serious about securing the border, they would not have rejected a bipartisan immigration deal in the Senate last month after former President Trump opposed it. This deal would have increased funding for the Border Patrol and required the president to expel all migrants crossing illegally during surges like the one at Shelby Park in December. The latest battle between Texas and Washington revolves around a new law signed by Governor Greg Abbott, authorizing over 2,700 law enforcement agencies to arrest migrants for illegally crossing the border. Critics argue that the law is too broadly written, that it fails to define the authorities can stop someone.
One of the reasons why Governor Abbott says he's not backing down here in this fight.
When Democrats have to face up to the reality of what Texas has to deal with every single day, they adopt the same approach that Texas has.
The record-breaking numbers here that we are just getting from Customs and Border Protection is showing what we have been reporting.
In a letter, it's demanding full access to the park, but Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton says the state does not plan to comply.
The Biden administration would put that time into securing the border as opposed to stopping Texas.
Lieutenant General Olivares of the Texas Department of Public Safety clarified that the law will be carried out far from the border and they have to develop probable cause to stop a car. This raises concerns about racial profiling and the possibility of immigrants and people of color being subjected to racial profiling. A federal judge temporarily stopped the new law from taking effect while it's being challenged in court. The Department of Justice and the American Civil Liberties Union are suing Texas, arguing that the law interferes with the federal government's authority over immigration. However, Governor Abbott argues that Texas is being invaded and has the right to defend itself, which resonates with militias and groups opposed to illegal immigration. The immigration system is currently broken and there is a lot of blame to go around. Governor Greg Abbott believes that invasion is the right word to use in this context, as the state is in imminent danger due to drug cartels and terrorists crossing daily. The convoys and militia have heard the language and have started to relocate migrants for their own safety. Governor Greg Abbott does not want crime, but he emphasizes that the end of the situation is with a president who will fulfill his oath of office and enforce the laws of the United States of America, which means denying illegal entry into the country. He has committed more than $11 billion to Operation Lone Star, and critics say that this has more to do with other factors like crackdowns on migration in parts of Mexico. There are still more than 1 million illegal border crossings in Texas every year, and at least a dozen lawsuits are being fought between Texas and the federal government over immigration issues. Former Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz worries that the cartels and criminal organizations are winning in this political game as they continue to reap the benefits while watching the state of Texas and Washington, D.C. go at it.
But because Joe Biden and the Democrats refuse to secure the border, Texas has and we will.
The Republican frontrunner landed about 300 miles away in Eagle Pass, Texas.
The city of New York was beside itself about all these migrants being bused to New York City.
This after the state seized control of the park to arrest migrants and a Supreme Court ruling stating those federal agents can cut.
Time for the speakers and some of my Republican friends in Congress who are blocking this bill to show a little spine.
In Texas, State Attorney General Ken Paxton denying federal Border Patrol agents unrestricted access to Shelby Park.
Executive Authority on Border. In response to Texas Governor Greg Abbott's recent comments that President Joe Biden ought to exercise more presidential authority to address the southern border, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas retracted his remarks. In an interview with CNN's Dana Bash for the State of the Union, Mayorkas said of the Republican governor he couldn't be more wrong. The truth is that Congress needs to act, and President Biden said that Congress needs to get a spine. The secretary stated after stating that in fact, former President Trump tried to close the border and it was enjoined in the courts and never saw the light of day. Abbott said that Biden was not using his executive authority to do any of those things that Congress has already authorized during last week's episode of State of the Union. New laws are not required for the presidency. A blame game involving border action between the president, Congress, and state officials has seen Abbott emerge as one of the main critics of the Biden administration. The bipartisan border plan that would have authorized tougher border measures and was partially written by a GOP senator was blocked by Senate Republicans last month in the face of a barrage of criticism from prominent House Republicans and former President Donald Trump. Following the installation of razor wire along the U.S.-Mexico border by Texas state authorities to discourage unauthorized immigration, tensions between Abbott and the federal government reach an all-time high.
And he's saying that he has a list of counter demands for the Department of Homeland Security that they must meet by February 15th.
They're in a lawsuit right now. If we win that lawsuit, we're going to have hundreds of miles of buoys as a border wall.
Shelby Park and Eagle Pass 3 weeks ago, removing Border Patrol agents and putting in new measures to stem illegal immigration.
Biden administration is trying to stop Texas from denying illegal entry into the country.
Following the incident, Mayorkas referred to these activities as unconstitutional in a cease and desist letter to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. The razor wire might be removed by the U.S. Border Patrol officials while the state's legal challenge to the practice is pending. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.